I said, Chuck, why didn't you tell me all this before I bought this car? He said, you had to join the club. I always wanted a Ferrari, and I could never afford one. And I always wanted a front-engine V12 car, and probably pre-1972. So I had found the Edsel Ford Speedster in a garage in DeLand, and it made more profit than any car I'd ever seen in my life. I mean, it was up in the seven figures. Suddenly, I promised my wife if I ever had a home run on a car, we'd remodel a house, but I was also going to buy a Ferrari. Kirk White, who had been chasing the Edsel Ford Speedster, and I found it when I sold it. He said, I'm glad that car's not in Jacksonville anymore. I just worry about it every day. It's gone now. I said, well, you always wanted a piece of that action. I've got some money. I want a Ferrari Daytona. He said, well, I got two of them here. Well, it can't be red. I want a Ferrari Daytona, but I don't want a red one. He said, I got a fly yellow one. I'll take it. Go down to New Smyrna, look at the car. We do the deal. I pay him for it. Driving back to Jacksonville, a little bit of a, shimmy, and it had wire wheels on it, and they're supposed to have alloys. Get to Jacksonville, and we have a fake cannonball plate on the back of it. California Cannonball. It's one that you would buy at a country fair, whatever name you want on a plate. So that's the only plate he had. So I say to my wife, let's go to dinner in the Ferrari. She gets in, we drive to this little place in San Marco in Jacksonville. And I'm sitting at a light, and this police officer comes right up behind me, and I see him looking at the plate, and looking at the plate. I've had the car 6 hours, already going to get a ticket for fake license plate. He passes on me, and we get to the restaurant, and I get out, and a tool roll in a Daytona costs 20 grand. All the little tools, the wrenches, everything. 20 grand for a tool roll. And it's in the trunk of the car. So I go to lock the car up to have dinner. There's no key to lock the doors. So I get on the cell phone, I call Kirk. I said, where's the keys for the door? Never had any. I said, well, how am I going to lock the car up? He says, well, you don't have to. It doesn't make any difference anyway, because the quarter windows on a Daytona have a little glue-on latch, and on hot weather, they fall off. So someone's going to get in your car whether you lock it or not. So I told my wife, get in the car, we're going to go home. I'm not going to leave it here with a $20 tool roll in an unlocked car. The next week, we were going to do Brian Redmond's Barnstorming Maine, a tour of Maine. And I shipped the car up by Reliable to Wayne Carini's shop. And I said, Wayne, change the oil, check all the belts, everything, make sure the car's good. I'll fly up to Hartford and pick it up, and we'll go up to Maine. So Jane and I go up, and we see Wayne. I said, how's the car? Oh, that's good, ready to go. So we get in the car, and we're going up to Maine, and the windows are down. It's a spring day, blue sky, and our eyes are watering, and we're smelling exhaust fumes. And I said, this is terrible. I said, run your window up. I'll turn on the air. My window goes, hers goes, it stops. So we get up to Maine. We went up to see Bob Bear, a collector up there, and I borrow some tools, and I take the door panel off, and this is an ongoing problem because someone had taken a Sharpie and drawn the pattern for the cable, so I adjust the window. Goes up, won't go down. It's all right, leave it up. And the air conditioner on early Ferraris, it makes noise, and it moves air, but it only works well if it's below 70 degrees when you don't need it. So the air conditioning was worthless. Next day it's pouring rain, and Jane looks and says, there's water coming under the windshield. She's taking, we had a paper towel roll, and she's shoving paper towels under the lower leading edge of the windshield. So we get to the hotel that night, and next day we have a puncture. We can't find a Michelin tube for an XWX tire anywhere in Maine. So now we're down to 4 wheels on the car. And every morning I get up and start the car up, and put it in reverse, and let the handbrake off. I feel it'll pop. I said, that's be the handbrake releasing, That goes on for a couple of days, then the tour's over. Then we're heading back to Wayne's shop, and I get to the toll gate at the Mass Turnpike in Connecticut, pay the toll, and big open road. I said, I'm going to shower down on this thing. I nail it, and all of a sudden the car goes into gyrations. I mean, it's wobbling, it's beating me up, and we can't go faster than 15 miles an hour. So I go up a ramp, go into a abandoned Exxon station. I get out and I look, and 23 spokes on the left rear wheel were all broken. It turns out, long term, someone had sent these wheels to Dayton to be rewired, and they were Baranis. So they used the wrong fittings and the wrong spoke and everything else. Plus, Daytonas were all delivered, except for the Spiders, with alloy wheels, not wire wheels, because the car was pretty heavy. And as modern day tires develop, wire wheels just can't put up with the lateral loads and all that stuff. So we leave the car at Wayne's and we fly home. And Chuck Queener, who is kind of our editor and art director for Amelia, I used to work with him at Road and Track, and he's up in Connecticut, but he was one of the founders of the Ferrari Club. He says, how was your tour? I said, well, you know, the exhaust fumes were a bit of a problem. Yeah, they're terrible in that car. Worse than a Spider. I said, okay. Spider cost $2 million, so I guess you can get more exhaust fumes. And I said, and the electric windows. Mine worked, but Jane's wouldn't. He says, no, didn't you know in the toolkit, there's a little hand crank. You pull that little plug on the door, and you can roll the window up. Ferrari knew the window lifts were bad, but rather than redesign them, they just gave you a little crank handle to roll them up. I said, okay. I didn't have one of those in a toolkit. Went on eBay and found one. And then I said, and then the windshield, the water was leaking in around the windshield. Yeah, they do that. It says, you're lucky the windshield didn't delaminate. They do that too. I said, really? And I told him about the wire wheels. Oh, you're not supposed to have wire wheels on a Daytona. You're supposed to have alloy wheels. I said, yeah, I found that out. I said, Chuck, why didn't you tell me all this before I bought this car? He said, you had to join the club. So I joined the club. And you know, back in those days, those cars, this was in the 70s, they were okay, but they weren't assembled very well. Mechanically, the Ferrari is good. It was bulletproof. You know, it's chain-driven camshafts, no belts. You know, it's a pretty dependable motor. The gearbox, when it's cold, you got to go from first to third till it warms up, then you can use second, like a lot of gearboxes do. They're pretty. My neighbors think I have the really best-looking 240Z in town. I would have to say, at that time, if you were comparing a 71 Ferrari Daytona with a 71 Chevrolet Corvette, the Corvette's assembly was probably better. The doors fit better, the gaskets fit better. But the Ferrari has that je ne sais quoi, that presence that the sound of a V12. It's the kind of car that when you're driving down the street, you see an underpass, you run the windows down if they'll work, and drop a gear, and just to hear it. You know, it's very visceral. That's what I like about the Ferrari. They drove like trucks. They didn't have power steering, so I put the electric power steering in it, which makes it easy to drive, and you can't tell it's in there. I was talking to Luigi Canetti Jr. I said, what'd you do when you were selling these cars new? How'd you get somebody? Because most of them, they were wooden wheels clad in leather. And most of the wheels break with people trying to steer the car, you know. So he said, well, we'd put 50 pounds of air in the tires when we demonstrated them, you know, and you could drive the car like this. And then when they came to take delivery, they put up 32 pounds, and you found out what it really drove like. They made like 1,200 of them over a 5-year period, so they're not really rare. Their prices have softened in the last few months. But I'm not worried about it. I enjoy the car. I've had the car 11 years. It still has about 42,000 miles on it. I think it's been rolled back. All the digits are, you know, who knows? It's had 6 owners, and an odometer is easy to disconnect in a Ferrari Daytona. It was originally sold to an Italian guy, and he sold it when I was a year old to Chuck Jordan, Vice President, General Motors Design. Jordan loved Ferraris, but the design staff thought the boss should drive a Corvette. Why is the Vice President, General Motors driving Ferraris? So he goes off to Europe on a trip and leaves the Daytona in the garage at the design studios in Warren, Michigan. And they decide they're going to have a little fun with him. So they do a Superfly pimp mobile with the Daytona in foam core and tape. Rolls-Royce grill, Rolls-Royce P100 headlights, Ben-Hur hubs, fender skirts, spare tires with rocket ship mirrors, padded top with a diamond window, and then opera windows and everything. They don't tell him. So he comes back off his trip, and he's got the chief designer for Volvo, and he says, you've got to see my Daytona. Goes down in the garage, opens the door, and there it sits in all its glory. Chuck was a nice guy. He wasn't known around the design studios of having a big sense of humor, you know. And he heard everybody laughing. He had to get with the program. Everything was put on with tape and stuff, you know, that design studios could do. So that car, we call it the Superfly Daytona.
We are living in some strange economic times, and Premier is here to help you use those circumstances to buy your dream car. They have a simple lease program that makes it easier than ever to buy your dream car. They do financing for vintage and exotic cars. I've used them in the past and I absolutely love Mitch and his team over there. So be sure to contact them before you go shopping to understand and get pre-approved for whatever your buying power is. That way you can go to the dealers, go to the private sellers, and make a very qualified but perhaps a little bit insulting offer.